Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Underneath the Hood. I'm Dave Martin, the owner of Martin's Auto Repair in Central Phoenix.
I'm Glen Hayward, the proud owner of Goodworks Auto Repair in sunny Tempe, Arizona.
And I'm Lee Weatherby with Accurate Automotive in the heart of Mesa.
And together, we represent 140 years of combined automotive experience.
Our goal is to change the perception of our auto repair industry by going behind the scenes and underneath the hood.
And we hope to share with you what it's like to own a small business and give you a perspective from an insider's point of view.
So let's get started. Good morning, guys.
Morning, Daver.
Is it morning already?
Yeah, well, I think so.
Holy crap, man. It seems like I just went to sleep.
Are you awake?
I'm awake. I'm here.
Got a little bit of sugar.
Yeah.
He's good.
I like that.
He's a little jerked up.
Yeah.
What do you got for us today, Glenn?
Well, today in history, actually, over 100 years ago, Rudolf Diesel, he must have been a German guy. It doesn't say, but...
Oh, is that Rudolph?
Rudolph.
Oh, I
the
like
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, Rudolf Diesel on this day in 1858 made a patent for a type of engine called a diesel engine, named after himself, of course, so humbly he named it after himself.
That's how they did it in the old
And
days.
the diesel engine, and not only that, he had to invent a type of fuel that would run in this because he found that some of the fuels that he was trying to, put into the diesel engine to make it operate were not efficient and were not efficiently burning. So not only did he patent the diesel engine, but he also patented the fuel that to this day, I'm sure it's been refined and changed somewhat from 1858.
Yeah, the process probably different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can't have a
that was
diesel
a
motor
few
if you
years
can't fuel
before
it,
I was
so-
born, though. So
Love it.
but it's amazing the stuff that people just are in the pursuit of perfection. They come up with incredible inventions.
Yeah.
Now, with you're okay? You're okay? I want to do the quote at the end if we can.
You want to do the quote at the end?
I do.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. If that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Well, today, I guess we're going to talk about the owner's manual and how that is evolved and changed over the years and what it really is there for. One of the things that always cracks me up is that if you look in a car that's back in the 60s, it taught you how to adjust the valves and taught you how to do all kinds of, it had a lot of information in there, right?
It did.
And today it just tells you not to drink the coolant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't feed it to the animals.
yeah. Keep out of keep
Unless
out of
you have
small
some
children.
pesky
Well, you-
cats in your backyard.
You know what's fascinating though, and the reason I got to be honest with you, I'm thrilled actually about this subject and this topic, and it's because I think sometimes the manual really gets overused from a standpoint of,
It's used as a defense
it is
mechanism with some people.
I don't think people
Well, my
really
manual
take the time to
says.
study it and understand it. But I really also don't understand foundationally how they really, if they really know what it is, because it's really designed as a sales manual, you know what I mean? So that the manufacturers, when they develop these new automobiles, they pre-sell cars before they come out on the market.
Yeah.
And what happens is they can say, look, this is what it's going to be for cost of ownership.
Yeah.
And the
Cost
thing of it
per
is,
mile,
but
whatever
that's,
they
Yeah.
narrow it
but
down
that's
to,
over
yeah.
a specific short period of time.
Right.
Once again, I think we talked about in a previous podcast how people are keeping their cars longer. You can't really afford. I guess the real question is, can you afford to follow the manual? You know what I mean? Can you afford to follow the manual? Because if you do, like I say, I'm a believer that would be a mistake.
Well, and then also too, the thing that I look at is just from a common sense standpoint is the thing of it is the climate that you're in.
Absolutely.
I mean, the owner's manual doesn't change if it's in Colorado or Arizona.
Right.
And we got total different climates.
Absolutely.
And another thing that's very interesting is the makeup of an engine, the nomenclature, if you will. GDI, we've talked about this in a previous podcast. Those vehicles need more maintenance in other areas that most cars don't need for a longer duration of time, right? And so the GDI services, gas direct injected motors, have to be serviced every 10, 15,000 miles. A GDI service needs to be done to clean up all the carbon that would normally get cleaned up by a normal internal combustion motor.
Well, and this is another thing too. Is you alluded to this earlier that I mean it's like getting all these terms and conditions papers like you're buying something, buy a house, and it's a Bible. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you got to read in there, and most of the time, by the time you're done reading,
50 pages, and
right.
you're tired by page 5.
Yeah,
Right.
You're going cross-eyed.
And when you're done, you're dumber than when you started because you don't understand any of it. And like the owner's manual.
Is it written in English, Dave?
Yeah, no kidding. You wonder sometimes. It's not basic English. It's it's all legalese.
There we go.
And you look at the owner's manuals today. They're 200, 300, some of them are even 500 pages. And back in the day, in when 60s and 50s, and it was 50 to 100 pages.
Right.
So there's a big difference, and it's overwhelming when you pull that thing out to try to read it and understand it. It's overwhelming to most people.
And I guess the real thing that I'm hoping that we can kind of educate on a little bit here is I don't want to allude to the fact that the manuals don't have any value. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Not. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But what I am saying is that you have to be careful about the information that you can glean from them or where you make your stand as far as maintenance, because it boils down to exactly what we've been talking about, we've always talked about, and that is building the relationship with the customer, helping to understand what it is that they want from their vehicle, and the longevity. What do you want from your vehicle? How long you want to keep it? And if it is a long time, then we have to modify, if you will, the maintenance program, for getting the longevity.
Right.
That your
And what do you
expectation.
use your vehicle for? I mean,
Right. How do you use it?
Is this your grocery getter? You go once a week or twice a week to the grocery store and pick up a few things.
You bet.
Are you pulling a trailer? Are you loading it down with camping gear and you're going up north and climbing in the mountains?
Are you using it for ride sharing? And
The variables definitely matter.
Right.
Yeah,
And to your point, you're 100% right. The thing of it is we're going to look at something. If we got a customer that's retired that drives their car maybe 5,000-10,000 miles a year, or the guy that's
Or
using
less.
or less, or the person that's using it for ride sharing.
Right.
And they're driving that car 20,000 miles a year.
Right.
There's going to be a whole different maintenance program there.
I had a car come in a few months ago. It was a 2021 and it had 300,000 miles on it.
That's a lot of miles.
My jaw
for
dropped.
4 years.
I looked at that. I was like, "You got to be kidding me!"
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's 30,000 miles a year.
No,
Well, 4 years, 125, 30, 60, 90, 120. It's about 30,000 miles a year. 4 years.
that's not surprising. No, it was 300,000 miles.
Oh, I'm
it
sorry,
had.
300. I thought
Yeah.
you said 120.
Oh no,
I was like, wow.
300,000 miles.
Wow.
Yeah, your math wasn't equating there, but I wasn't sure exactly where you were going with
And I
that.
said, "Where did you go to
I
school?"
completely missed the 300.
No, 300,000 miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that means that, that car was
You-
on the road almost 24/7.
Yeah.
It
You
would
know what
have
I mean?
to be.
Yeah.
How many more cars have you seen in your guys' shop that are over 200,000 miles? That number is
Oh yeah,
is
all the
increasing
time. now.
all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all
Two,
the
three,
time.
two, three times a week we
Yeah.
see them with that kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
mileage.
And the interesting thing, in some cars, they're just barely getting broke in.
Yeah,
In
they're-
others,
they've maintained
they're,
them.
They're late for a crusher.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people, have the kind of miles and the car's so good they just get rid of it because they're bored with it. It's
Yeah.
not because it's problematic or they're afraid something's going to break. And I try to talk them out of it. You really want to get into a car payment at $2,000 a month, have to carry full coverage. There's so many add-ons, not just the price of the car and the interest. Now you're paying full. You got to carry full coverage on it until that car is paid off. And if that means 7 or 10 years, you're paying all that extra insurance. And as we know, insurance has absolutely doubled in the last couple of years.
Right. Well, let me ask this question of each of you. David, let me ask you first, if you don't mind. But when people talk about, maintenance and following, do the dealers actually follow the guides?
And from what I've seen, no.
Yeah.
Most of them.
They have their own guide, don't they?
They have their own guide. Yeah.
Their own maintenance schedules.
Right. And like you said, the thing of it is when the vehicle gets older and gets more miles on it, there's different things that need to get done that aren't really in the manual.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Glenn, how about you?
Well, I think that, I hear many different opinions even about what's being said to people at the dealerships because
Yeah.
it's coming from another human being who has his or her own convictions about when to do stuff. So if they try to cheapskate themselves, I change my oil every 10 or 15,000 miles or whatever. And so they're transmitting that information to the customer and saying, oh, well, they told me at the dealership I like to wait, 10 or 15,000 miles to change my oil. Well, that's really bad advice. But if that's that salesperson's conviction about their own car, even though they're trained to tell them, this is thus and so, yeah, I know they tell me to tell you this, but I'm trying to save you some money here. You're not saving them any money. You're going to cost them in the long run, especially for people who do keep their cars for 100, 200 plus thousand miles. The damage that is done doesn't really appear and rear its head until it's there.
And see, therein lies the key right there. If you actually follow the manual, which is basic, you know what I mean, which is quite nice.
It's better than just
It's
guessing.
better than nothing. It's
Yeah.
better than nothing. That's for sure. That's why I say there is some value. However, if you do choose that route to follow that and do only that, you will be missing a lot of things. And the hidden damage, the things that occur, they kind of know. You know what I mean? They have a lot of people that do kind of, the underlying, research to find out this car will last about, this many miles. We're talking about vehicles over 200. Most of the time, yeah, it's about the extent of what you're going to get if you follow it, to that degree. And that's if you're lucky. That's not necessarily a guarantee. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But by being proactive, you know what I mean, and taking charge of doing things on what I'm going to call a routine or systemized maintenance program, that's where it's all about. That's what it's all about. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So we talked
I
about
think
5,000 miles as the kind of that's the pillar for length. You don't really want to go over that.
I think people refer more to their owner's manual to figure out how to program their radio and download the
Probably one of the five most
serious-
important pages.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. they
Where's
really-
the spare tire?
they-
Yeah, how to turn on the seed
they
heater,
just-
how to turn on the seed heater.
Or turn it off turn it off in Arizona.
They assume that they've owned and driven cars for X amount of years. But like I said in the beginning of this podcast, the change intervals, the type of fluids, the type of technology that's used that maybe didn't exist in the last 2 or 3 cars that they had, they don't understand that technology has changed the intervals of maintenance and the types of maintenance that need to be done that maybe rarely ever needed to get done in their previous vehicles.
So if we can, and I love that's a perfect segue into, let's talk about some of the maintenance. Now, you know what? We have a guide, but there's all kinds of things. I wanted to reference something that I printed off the internet today.
Okay.
All right. And it was about car maintenance. And this is, what do people do when they need information? They go to Google, in most cases. They go to the internet,
And,
right?
and there's nothing
Right,
inherently wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with
But
that.
opinions are like, everybody has one.
Yeah.
The problem is, one of the very first replies, I just follow the manual. And I thought to myself, oh my, okay. And so there again, you don't know what.
I follow
that's-
Emmanuel, but I don't know about the manual.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was interesting. Then it says, this is by Allstate, all right, and it said it was last updated in June of 23,
Okay.
and it gave kind of a list of some basic things, which I thought was fantastic, all right? Checking the tire pressures and rotating tires. How often should we be doing that, guys? Let's just talk about this little list for a quick second. How often should we be doing that?
Well, checking you got to remember too, the cars have changed. Now they got a little light on the dash that tells you the tires are low.
There you go.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
you know,
but okay. But if they've ever had an experience with someone who says, well, one of your tire pressure sensors is bad and it's going to cost you $100.
And really all it needed was air and relearn.
Well, it could be. I mean, after
A lot of times the
period of
batteries-
time, the batteries in them die,
that'll
right?
go
So
down.
it's legitimate. But you don't necessarily have to replace all 4 of them. And
Right.
if your spare tire in some cases has one as well, now you got 5 sensors.
Well, let's talk about rotating. How often do you recommend to your clients?
Every time you change oil.
Okay, so every 5,000.
time. Every 5,000.
And we're the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, every 5,000.
And those tires need to be inspected to see if they're wearing funny. You have wheel alignment issues or whatever. And that's another good reason, though, to rotate those tires, because that wear is just going to continue. You're going to end up having to buy at least 1 or 2 tires. And then you got disproportionate wear, and that can affect your ABS if it's, grossly disproportionate. The tread depth on your front and rear wheels, especially with all-wheel drive vehicles.
Yeah.
It can tear up the differential. I mean, there's so many things. I don't want to get too technical. but
Let's do this. It says motor oil. We've already kind of identified that. We know the 5,000 miles about what that. But then it says very basic and generic. Other important fluids. So let's define some of those other important fluids. Okay. You alluded to the fact of differential fluid. How often is differential fluid really checked out here in Arizona, and who's doing that?
We do, but I can't speak for
Amen,
anybody
Glen.
else.
Yeah, we check it. Yeah,
And it's
you
usually
should.
60 to 80,000 miles in most cases.
There
It's
we go.
Not a big deal.
There we go.
It's not real frequent, but it still needs to be done.
You bet.
Well,
You
I've
bet.
never blown up a transfer case in my life. You could say that, or my
But have you ever had
differential.
to rebuild a
But
differential?
Yeah, but it depends on how and what. If are you pulling a trailer? Are you
Bingo.
there's so
Backing
many
a boat
different
into
factors.
into the water.
You
That
bet.
has,
You
that
bet.
has
Cause
everything
problems.
to
The
do
where.
with when it should be done and
Yeah.
how often.
Yeah.
So
You bet.
some guy's he's got a big old diesel with all that horsepower, and he's pulling a 20,000-pound trailer behind him, or he's hauling cars with it or something. We're talking about the frequency level gets cut in half at least.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what. So we talked a little bit about brake fluid before. Let's just say, is there a service interval? At Accurate Automotive, we believe that every 2 years, people should be getting their brake fluid serviced. You know what I mean? Roughly about, people are doing anywhere from 12 to 20,000 miles a year. So let's call it 24 to 40,000 miles. But once again, we put a year on that based on the simple fact that some people just let it go and go and go and go. And
Yeah.
never really do anything. And a lot of times when people are getting their brakes done, so do brake reline, brake service, something of that nature, are they changing the brake fluid? In a lot of cases, they're not. You know what I mean? It's just pad, slap, and go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whatever the case may be. The reality of it is, if you really want to get on top of it, 400,000 miles, you know what I mean, is your expectation, then be proactive. You know what I mean? So what about you? What do you guys feel like brake fluid should be done?
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
I would say every 2-3 years
Well,
it should be flushed out, and
Yeah.
we're talking about ABS,
Right.
Which is
It's a big deal.
yeah.
It's a
Well,
big deal.
it's-
People, because it's a big expense when things go wrong.
Right.
Oh,
Well,
man.
and
You
I
could spend $2-3 grand on some of the ABS systems
Just on
when
the
they get
modules alone,
contaminated. Yeah,
just when you're
anti-lock brake systems.
I always explain that to clients. The thing of it is that the I would say the three most expensive things that you're going to replace in your vehicle is your engine, your transmission, and your rear differential.
You bet.
And the thing of it is doing the maintenance on it and keeping on top of that and doing it regularly is just going to give you the longevity, so you can run that without having to do those expensive repairs.
You bet. You bet. Well, let me ask you this. So we've talked a little bit about tires. Power steering fluid. Does power steering fluid need to be serviced?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what? How many times have you pulled in the car and you're going, oh my
Not
word.
It's a really obnoxious noise like that. I
We-
can make obnoxious noise. You can ask my wife. But
So-
the deal is, I mean, and now electric steering has become a bigger thing. I would
bet.
say 90% of the cars that are out there have electric steering, so there's an electric motor.
Only the
as
newer
opposed
cars.
to having yes,
Yeah, only the newer cars. The older cars still
Yeah.
are standard conventional
Yeah.
steering.
exactly. And
What kind of service interval for the ones that do have fluid?
I would say 30,000 miles.
It's perfect. That's exactly what we do. Every 3 years or about 30,000 miles. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We
the fluid
recommend
begins
that.
to get discolored, and that means there's contaminants in there.
You bet.
And that pump is a super high pressure. I mean, it's like 1,200 psi on most vehicles. That enables you to steer. So it starts to get sticky, and contaminants. Anything you got a steering rack that moves back and forth, which has got
Little valves.
It's got little valves, but it also has
And the seals too. We
Oh,
don't talk about the
It
absolutely.
has,
seals.
it has
Absolutely.
plungers in there, and
You
as
bet.
those plungers rasp back and forth against an aluminum body, those contaminants, those little pieces of aluminum build up and so on. It gets in the pump, and then pretty soon the pump starts failing, and it starts whining like I described earlier. You don't want to hear it again, though, do you, audience? No,
Yeah.
I didn't think so. All right.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, this is a big one because, especially with the fact that, think about our climate, okay? And I get asked this all the time. Lee, when should I replace my coolant? How often should we be replacing coolant in our vehicles today? Dave, what do you think?
Well, they say it's 100,000 miles. what you do it?
If it stays in the bottle,
If it stays in the bottle,
it'll last for 100,000
Yeah,
miles.
but
Yeah.
do you
Put it
believe
in the
that?
trunk of your
No.
car.
No. See, but wait, that was just classic.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
Because that was completely off the cuff.
Yeah.
And you said, they say,
Yeah.
well, everybody's got a they.
Yeah.
They say, and then you say 100,000 miles. And then all of a sudden, I said, do you believe that? And guess what? I mean, without even a thought.
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Well,
You know,
okay,
I'm not
well-
doing that to my car.
Let me go through a quick scenario here.
Yeah.
Antifreeze flows through several different kinds of rubber, different kinds of metal. You got steel, you got aluminum, you got cast iron, You got all this stuff, plastics,
Yeah.
and your radiator has got a plastic core on it and aluminum,
What about the
pins.
block?
And well, that's what I mean. The block
Exactly.
is steel, but it's got aluminum components that coolant goes through. So as anything, like the riverbeds become deeper and deeper as the water runs through, well, you're erasing some of that metal, some of that plastic, some of that everything as that coolant flows, and at incredible temperatures, 220 degrees,
You bet.
down to 0
Upper-
degrees or whatever, depends on
Absolutely.
where you live. But so that as that picks up those contaminants, it changes the actual chemistry of the coolant itself. So now it no longer functions as a lubricant, B, a thermal protector, and everything else like that. So over a period of years, and I'd say 30,000 miles is approximately 2.5, 3 years, maybe 2 years of driving, it should be flushed out, because as that contaminates itself, it also does something to the inside of those hoses, which you can't see.
Right.
Right, you
These things
you
wear
don't
out
pull
from the
your hose
inside.
off and look through and say, "Oh, it looks good to me." No, it's flowing through your heater hoses. It's flowing through your heater core.
Yeah.
And how much more heater core and radiator failure have we seen in recent years?
Well, if they're following that 100,000 miles,
It is 10 times
It
what it
is.
used to be. I'm
It
putting in
is.
100 radiators a
Yep.
year at
Yep.
least, or more,
Yeah.
or heater cores. You got to tear the entire dash out of the car.
Correct.
The cost is thousands of dollars to do that stuff.
But see, that's what we're talking
We're
about.
talking
right
about
now.
preventative maintenance.
You bet. But here's the thing, and Glenn, I really love the analysis that you just gave, and your answer. But think about this, guys. For general population, it is so confusing.
It is.
They say 100,000 miles, and you just said 3 years or 30,000 miles. People are going, whoa, wait a minute, because you know what? What they hear is more cost. And Glenn, you just absolutely
Where's
gave
the more cost? The more
perfect-
cost is when you break something.
Bingo.
When your radiator leaks, your heater core
But sometimes
busts.
that's not always equated.
And,
You see what
and
I
the
mean?
water
Sometimes that's
valves
not
that,
always
that open and
A
close,
B.
they start leaking because those little valves and O-rings that are in there can't hold that contaminated fluid. It starts to eat its way through stuff.
It really, really does.
It becomes the enemy of the engine and instead of its best friend.
Well, to use an analysis or copycat from you, it's just like our human
Oh,
body.
copying me again.
I
are you?
am. You know what?
Oh.
Things on our body wear out from the inside. It's generally
Yeah.
not the outside that
What
wears
you
out
put
first.
in yourself is what's going to come out.
Well, and we've been talking about the owner's manual, and what it is, and there is we talked about there is value in it. I mean, a lot of times, like a lot of people come in there and they tell us, "Hey, lights on my dash. I don't know what it is."
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
so the owner's manual has all of the
One of the most important
The
5 pages.
diagnostic-
one of the most important five pages.
What do the lights mean?
How many people used to come into your shop and go, "What is this? The tire monitoring light?
Yeah.
It looks like a exclamation point with two half circles around it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't really look like a tire.
It looks like an exclamation point.
yeah. You really don't. You look at that and you're like, I don't know what that means.
It looks like an
I-
upside down omega sign with an exclamation point.
But,
in the
but
middle
just
of
to
it.
stay on that topic for a quick second, think about this. People come in and say, I got a bad battery because my battery lights on.
Yeah.
You go, well, that generally doesn't mean the battery's bad. That generally means that we've got a situation with the
Got a
alternator
got a
or something in the
charging
charging
problem.
system
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. So
Well,
let's get
Oh,
back.
something else. I'll throw this in for what it's worth. Many cars now have 2 batteries.
Yeah.
If you have auto stop on your vehicle, both batteries need to be tested and serviced. I just read an article in Ratchet and Wrench this week about that it can cause so many other problems and chaos with your vehicle when that smaller battery, it's just a dinky little battery, but it starts the car. Your car shuts off to save fuel when you get to the stoplight, and then it restarts the car. Well, all of the power to restart your car comes from that little battery, and they do wear out like any battery.
Love it.
And on that back on the owner's manual thing too, it just there's a list of inspecting. Inspect this.
Inspect.
that. And so you got down here wiper blades. That's a classic, right?
That
there,
is a
because
classic.
out here. I mean,
5 days a year we get rain.
Yeah. 5 days a year, and when you turn them on, it doesn't work with a crap. You know what I
so
mean?
you got to change your wiper blades here twice a year at least.
Yeah, and guess what? See, but that's perfect because we have it down twice a year.
Yeah.
And you know what? People go, well, do I really need them? Well, the thing of it is,
You will when it rains.
that's the point. You know what I mean? On the day you need them, if you're trying to get them, now you're already behind.
It's better to have them than not need them than need them and not have them.
Amen. Especially
Did I
for
say
the
that
cost.
too fast?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, especially for the cost. Well, let's go to a couple more vital fluids because we've only gotten to the third checklist on these manuals, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing: transmission fluid. This is one that's really confusing for people because you've got some that say, well, I never needs transmission fluid.
Oh, the
Then
old
you've got
timers will
these-
tell you.
Lifetime. Then you've got these CVT units that people are going, oh, I can't afford to touch that. You know what I mean? Don't want to do that. I mean, so let's talk about
Is
transmission.
that what Nissan told them when all of their CVT failures went to hell in a handbasket?
Yeah, we don't want you even looking
Don't
at
ever
it.
touch that fluid.
Well, and the cost of a transmission nowadays is so
Minimum 6,000 is what we were talking about.
minimum $6,000 for a transmission.
That's just for the part.
Yeah, in
Then
some
there's the
cases,
installation.
In some cases,
Yeah, in some cases, you're right.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely really important that you stay on top of that and make sure that you have the proper fluid in there. And having the proper fluid in there is one of the most important things.
Let me ask this question, and I'm just going to tell you, at Accurate Automotive, we believe every 4 years or 40,000 miles, you should be doing a transmission exchange, transmission fluid service, okay? But here's the interesting thing that I would ask, okay? Once again, it boils down to what Glenn had brought up earlier. Are you pulling a trailer? Are you backing
Yeah.
up all the time? Are you doing certain things? Because these create heat. And here's the thing, and this is just as simple as I can make it. Do you have to wait until the fluid discolors before you replace it?
You shouldn't.
Thank you, Dave.
Because-
Once it starts discoloring, it's already on its way out the door. It
You
doesn't
guys-
have the proper inside of transmissions. I don't want to get too technical, but there are what they call friction modifiers.
Yes.
Those friction modifiers are little droplets of. I don't even
Goodness.
know what the composition is, but,
Little
but it
droplets
makes
of
all the
goodness.
clutches grab, right?
Mhm.
And so as the transmission
Friction
oil
modifiers
breaks
is what
down,
they are.
yeah, friction modifiers, it breaks down.
Mhm.
And now the clutches start to slip, which even puts more contamination into the fluid.
You bet.
But-
But by design, you know what I mean? Fluids and systems and things that are in our vehicle, they're not supposed to leak. They're not supposed to. So they have no way. So all the contaminants, any byproducts of use, all get trapped within, you know what I mean, these reservoirs. And so exchanging the fluids in these things is absolutely vital, because one of the big things that I want, hopefully, that people will put together is heat is what breaks down everything, including our bodies, including, the cars, the rubbers, everything. Well, heat is intensified when you have more contamination. You know what I mean? And contamination could be anything from like the brake fluid, where we have the moisture in the waters, to anything like you have in your transmission fluid, the deposits, you know what I mean? The clutch fibers, the friction modifiers, the things that just get stored in there, to the power steering, where we get in our bodies, we get plaque, and they call that bad, right? Well, the same thing is true in the fluids in a car. You know what I mean? And so the more often that we will engage with routine type maintenance, and you won't find these things in those manuals. That's what I'm trying to get at.
No,
they say, just
again,
like to your point,
driving
Dave,
habits,
inspect,
ambient
inspect,
temperatures,
inspect.
and where you drive, all of that stuff is a big factor. So what's next on the list here?
Well, the last one that I have that I would probably ask, and I've tried to identify to some degree. How about in induction services and things like that? Why are those things important that we do anymore, based on the simple fact of today's automobiles? Well,
GDI.
yeah.
Well, and on GDI, you can't just do a normal induction
Correct.
service like you would do on a non-GDI vehicle.
Right.
What is
It-
GDI, so the listeners know?
Gas,
direct
injected.
There you
Yeah,
go. Okay.
gas direct injected.
And the majority of cars, I'll bet you 80% of car manufacturers are using GDI technology. BMW, Audi, Volkswagen started it 20 years ago, and they decided it was so fuel efficient. Those German engineers, came up with a great idea. The bad side of it is that where the gas used to spray on the backs of the valves and
get
wash
washed
it,
down.
and washed all the carbon
Deposits.
and everything,
Mhm.
the deposits now accumulate because the injector is down in the cylinder.
Yeah.
Right next to the spark plug. So as soon as that fuel hits, the spark plug sparks, and the horsepower difference and the
Drastic.
get up and go is drastically different. I mean, it probably
Well-
boosted horsepower by 20% on any.
So what you're
engine.
saying is they solved one problem and created another.
That's exactly right, and that happens quite often, frankly. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
right.
With things,
Absolutely, yeah.
and that doesn't mean that it was bad. It just means that as a
different.
result of this,
Yeah.
we now have this,
Right.
and it's things that we have to look.
So
for.
we have to change the maintenance.
Absolutely
That's really what it
adjust.
adjust. We have to adjust
Yes,
to make sure that you don't end up with a running problem, because that's eventually what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
And so you don't want to end up with a check engine light on. And
You bet.
flashing is even worse.
I can't
You
wait
bet.
to have my first hydrogen car. Then I won't have to worry about buying gasoline anymore.
Glenn, this is not a futuristic podcast.
You know what? When my brother worked for Ford back in the 1980s and 90s, before he retired from there, they were already working with hydrogen technology.
Oh, yeah.
Ford has been on that for a long time. The problem is they're getting all this pushback from the oil companies who want to sell petroleum.
Yeah.
And so they were putting the kibosh on everything, and they got all kinds of pressures to stop, doing it. Now hydrogen is finally turning the corner again and saying, you know what, you environmental freaks better, get up and figure it out that this is really the best thing. There's absolutely, you could breathe right out of the tailpipe, and it's non-contaminating to the environment.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to boost the idea or anything, but it's another. There's so many concepts, so many technologies, so much has changed in our industry and is morphing every year.
And therein lies, even to the point, you know what? The manuals have a purpose. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
Like you said, it's
Yeah.
cost of
They make
ownership.
really good kindling if you're camping and you can't find your kindling.
I
Get
don't
out
wanna
your owner's
go,
manual.
I don't want to go there. What I would say is this: is get with the people that you trust to work with your cars. You know what I mean?
Build that relationship.
Build that relationship.
We say this at every podcast. Build that
Absolutely.
relationship with that shop.
It's vital.
It's vital, and get the information, ask the questions,
Yeah.
and if you're not getting the information or you're not getting your questions answered, seek somebody else.
Absolutely. But the thing that I would say is be willing to expose what your real desire is. I mean,
Yeah.
if I come to you and say, Dave, can you please help me get 300,000?
Yep.
I need to get 300,000
What's the
miles
goal? What's the
out of my
goal?
car. And then we
Yep.
can set a path to performance to get there, you know what I mean? And build a plan of action. And it's very, very proactive, engaged, where you know what, you're taking now control, all right, of your maintenance costs and your automotive costs and things like that. Yes, will there every now and then we have a fuel pump fail or something of that nature? Of course you will, and you may have an event from time to time.
But
those,
there's
they'll be
even ways to
dissipated.
prevent that from happening too
Absolutely.
frequently. Fill your tank when it's
Absolutely.
Half full,
half
yeah.
tank.
Yeah.
That's what we tell, and we all get those cars in there. And this is going off on a different path, but we get those cars in there. They're on E,
Yeah.
and you call the customer and say,
I just
You're
ran
gonna
out
have
of
to
ga-
put some gas in your car to do a test drive.
right,
Yeah,
right. But
exactly.
then they say, oh no, you got at least another 10 miles to go, and I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's a 50-50 shot right there.
Well,
But-
guys, I think that the biggest thing that I'm grateful. Thank you guys, really,
Yeah.
for entertaining this topic, because the manual is a great thing, but it was invented really as a cost of ownership type of thing over a specified period of time.
Right.
And now we're understanding everything has to be adjusted because people are adjusting and keeping their cars a little bit longer. Not a little bit, but a lot.
The
to go
manufacturers
from-
want you to buy a new car every 3 years.
Well, that's the idea.
so then you really don't have to do much, but change the oil, and maybe you have to put a battery in.
I
or something,
I didn't want to say it, but the underlying
true.
key is that helps them to sell more cars. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because once again, if I can help you, wear your car at a rate that I can predict, I can have a car available for you when you need one.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it does follow that.
But it's back to the, and this we'll end the podcast after this here, but it's back to building that relationship, getting the proper information, getting good solid information, where your what climate you're in, what you do with the vehicle, how you drive it, what are your goals to get out of this vehicle? What is the plan? What is your 5-year or 10-year plan?
And every car's a little bit different.
And every car's a little different.
And to something that was alluded to earlier, every different manufacturer has little kind of nuances and things that go on with their vehicles,
Yep.
and we see them. And so those things even have to be made adjustments. You know what I mean? To where you do this maybe a little bit more often than what you would normally on this other type of car.
Right.
So you have two different styles or types of car in your garage, in your driveway, and you take care of one this way and you take care of this one that way. And it's because of the little things that we know are, with this manufacturer.
Inherent problems with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Well,
listen, can I share this quote real quick?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
I thought
Yeah,
this would
let's
be
do
something
that.
fun. It's really not about the car that you drive. Okay? It's about how you drive your car. That'll make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Exactly what we're talking about.
Good
right
quote.
here. Yeah.
Thanks,
Good
Lee.
quote.
You
Yeah,
bet,
thanks,
guys.
Lee.
Yeah.
Hey, it was another great podcast. Great to see you guys, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next podcast.
Thanks,
Amen.
Avery.